Canarsie, Brooklyn, Monday, January 28th, 1980. It's after 9 p.m., and 21-year-old recent parolee, Salvatore DeSarno, aka Crazy Sal, is standing outside his car on East 78th Street and Flatlands Avenue. In February of 1978, Sal DeSarno was sentenced to 3 years in prison for an armed robbery charge. He had robbed a 60-year-old woman at knife point, a crime which could have landed DeSarno 15 years in the pen. 18 months into his sentence, Brooklyn Supreme Court Justice Anthony Jordan had written a letter in support of DeSarno's release. He stated that the young man had a good reputation while being incarcerated, and expressed that he was worthy of rehabilitation. Furthermore, he had a job as a laborer lined up for him upon release. On August 20th, 1979, DeSarno was released from Elmira Correctional Facility in upstate New York. The troubled young man was back on the streets of Canarsie. Canarsie at that time was still a predominantly Italian and Jewish area, but demographics and zoning laws were slowly changing, which in the coming years would bring racial tension into the area. Salvatore DeSarno was coming of age in a rough era of Brooklyn history. Canarsie and some of the surrounding Brooklyn neighborhoods were ripe with killers, thieves, and drug dealers. During the 70s and 80s, it wasn't hard for a young man to fall into trouble with the law. Whether you were a lone outcast like Sal DeSarno, or perhaps looking to join a gang of like-minded criminals, one would not have to look too far. At that time, the mafia and other criminal gangs ruled the streets with an iron fist, and their presence was no secret. Upon Sal's release in 1979, Lucchese mobsters like Paul Vario and his crew still ruled his hometown streets of Canarsie, and they were just coming off one of the biggest heists in American history. Gambino mobsters like Roy DeMeo and his crew were operating just a couple of miles away in neighboring Flatlands. They were heading the Empire Boulevard car theft operation at that time, and turning the back of the Gemini Lounge into a human chop shop. The community member's property was open game for thieves. People were shot left and right. Sons and daughters were disappearing off the streets, never to be seen again. A decade riddled with violence and economic crisis was coming to an end, but New York City wasn't out of hot water yet. With Sal DeSarno a free man, he began working as a laborer at Brooklyn-based Forward Industries. After an injury, he ceased working as a laborer. He then obtained a job in a supermarket, where he was soon relieved of his duties when the owner expressed concern over his robbery of a senior citizen. He then obtained employment at a fruit stand on Flatlands Avenue. In the days preceding the night of January 28, 1980, Sal DeSarno was wanted for questioning in a local donut shop robbery, and he had also been seen around town brandishing a pistol. As he stood beside his car that night on East 78th Street in Flatlands, police received a call about some rowdy teens causing trouble in the area. 12-year, highly decorated police veteran Cecil Sledge makes his way over in response to the call. Cecil Sledge grew up in Alabama, but came to New York City in the late 1960s in order to become a police officer. He would end up in Canarsie's 69th precinct. He fell in love with the city and prided himself on the idea that he lived in Flatbush, while many of his co-workers moved out of the city into Long Island and other quiet suburbs. He had the reputation as a tough, hard-nosed cop, and he was no stranger to the local street thugs. Officer Sledge was working alone in his patrol car for an entire week due to his partner calling out sick. On his way to respond to the call, Sledge spots DeSarno on East 78th Street in Flatlands. Him and fellow officers of the 69th Precinct were advised of Sal's status as a wanted man. They were told to proceed with extreme caution if he was to be spotted by them. As DeSarno stood beside his tan 1975 sedan, Officer Sledge pulls over, gets out, and approaches DeSarno. Shots ring out. Salvatore DeSarno hits Officer Sledge 4 times in the chest with his .38 Smith & Wesson. As Officer Sledge falls, he gets off 2 shots, both which hit DeSarno. DeSarno jumps in his car and backs over the 12-year veteran, who gets stuck under the car and dragged for blocks. Eventually, Officer Cecil Sledge is freed from under the car, and Sal drives a half a mile through the Brooklyn streets before crashing into a home at 5715 Avenue I. He enters into the home and takes hostage a 50-year-old housewife, Marion Mazer. "I won't hurt you. I'm shot and I need help. I want to call my mother to come and get me," Sal DeSarno screams to the woman. He continues to talk to Miss Mazer as blood pours from his wounds. "I killed a cop. I'm shot and they're after me." In minutes, the cops arrive outside the home. After some negotiations, Sal tosses his gun out of the home and yells out, "If you shoot me, I have a knife." "They're not going to hurt you. You're unarmed. I'm your witness," Marion Mazer says to Sal. Eventually, Sal gives up. He makes his way out and is apprehended by police. Sal DeSarno would be booked for the murder of police veteran Cecil Sledge. Sledge was wearing a bulletproof vest, which should have saved his life. However, being dragged under Sal's car would be the major contributing factor in his death. The story is big news in the city, and the police department mourns one of their fallen. Cecil's wife and 2 children would also mourn. 21-year-old Crazy Sal DeSarno, who was paroled early on a 3-year sentence, committed the ultimate sin: murder. After being interviewed at the 69th precinct, Sal makes his way out in police custody, the press awaiting anxiously. He's scruffy, disheveled, and shirtless, his bare chest emblazoned with a tattoo depicting a skull, wearing a cowboy hat and handkerchief. Press photographers snap away at the sight. The following day, New York City would get a view of the modern-day outlaw, who just flushed his life away. Details about Sal's personality were also being released to the public. He was described by people in Canarsie as a loner who had a tough time making friends, often referred to as Crazy Sal. He grew up without a father, and his mother was quoted as saying, "My son didn't hate anyone. He didn't hate cops. He was just looking for somebody to like him." In the coming days, the NYPD would have to answer for their policy of letting officers in patrol by themselves. PBA Vice President Charles Peterson would demand an end to one-man patrols. And with that, Police Commissioner Robert McGuire suspended one-man patrol cars until the following month, which gave the NYPD time to assess the practice. Eventually, the practice was banned, unless a lone officer was equipped with a shotgun. In February of 1981, Crazy Sal DeSarno's trial would start. He would be represented by famed civil rights activist and attorney William Kunstler, a man who represented mobsters like John Gotti and Joe Bonanno, as well as civil rights icons like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Kunstler's defense team would claim that DeSarno was fired at first by Officer Cecil Sledge, and that DeSarno was just protecting himself. They would also claim that Sal DeSarno and Officer Sledge had a history of run-ins during Sledge's time as a cop, portraying a bias on Cecil Sledge's behalf. However, this could not be proved, nor could witnesses prove that Crazy Sal DeSarno was fired on first. On Wednesday, April 15th, 1981, Sal DeSarno would be sentenced to 25 years to life for his role in the murder of Officer Cecil Sledge. As an angry DeSarno was being hauled out, he screamed at the judge, "You're going to be judged yourself in the revolution, and I'm going to be there as a spectator to see you get a fair trial like I got." What revolution that was, I'm not sure. But till this day, Salvador DeSarno sits in prison. In 2012 and 2018, Crazy Sal's story would resurface again. On both occasions, he was up for parole and denied. Politicians and New York City law enforcement agencies worked hard to keep Sal behind bars. No telling whether Sal will ever get out. It's certainly been proven that when and if Sal comes up for parole again, a powerful army of naysayers are going to be there to squash any chance of him walking the streets of New York City again. Whenever an NYPD cop is killed in the line of duty, the story always makes big headlines. It will surely stand out amongst the bevy of city news flowing into the station. Crazy Sal DeSarno, the damaged 21-year-old criminal who threw his life away on a January night in 1980, also stood out. For a moment in time, he was big news, rising above all New York City headlines. But there was something else about Sal that caught the eyes of the public. Something else that stood out. The tattoo on his chest. The skull with the cowboy hat and handkerchief. The remains of a dead cowboy, providing just enough inspiration for an outlaw in the making. The image first appears on the 1937 Francis Bonamy book, Death on Dude Ranch. The tattoo is thought to first be drawn by influential Norfolk, Virginia tattoo artist Cap Coleman. August B. Cap Coleman got a start in the early 20th century, and his impact on American traditional tattooing is immense to say the least. His designs have stood the test of time and graced the walls of thousands of tattoo shops and the bodies of those interested in the art of American tattooing. Sal's tattoo was done by legendary Brooklyn tattoo artist Tony Polito, who got interested in tattooing in 1959. After moving around for a bit, he settled back in Brooklyn. From the late 60s to 1980, Tony operated out of 646 Lefferts Avenue, providing tattoos out of the basement of his parents' home. From 1981 to 2014, Tony could be found at 742 Lefferts Avenue, just up the block from his former location. Both spots were in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, and for much of Tony's career, his profession was outlawed in New York City. In 1961, New York City banned the practice of giving anyone a tattoo. Their claim was that it was an effort to deter hepatitis outbreaks, though some believe this was a cover for other motives. The ban wouldn't be lifted until 1997. During the illegal years of tattooing in New York City, Tony stood out as one of the premier spots in town where one could get a classic American tattoo. Tony's clientele consisted of small-time neighborhood goons to big-time gangsters, or hoods as he would refer to them as, with the occasional blue-collar worker and other types who wanted the needle to paint their skin. Though back then, the public largely viewed the act of getting a tattoo something a traveling sailor or someone living on the fringe of society would take part in. The Crazy Sal tattoo, or Rough Rider, as Tony Polito would have referred to it as, has seen quite the resurgence over the past few years. With the advent of Instagram and other social media outlets which spread designs across the globe, many people have decided to get this tattoo themselves. You could even see it on actor Jonah Hill's forearm pictured here. Tony Polito passed away in 2017, but his influence remains a part of the fabric of American tattooing, as well as New York City's history. To learn more about Tony Polito and the Rough Rider tattoo, also known as the Crazy Sal tattoo, I met up with Rich Phi, co-owner and tattoo artist at R&D Tattoo in Glendale, Queens, New York. We talked about Sal DeSarno, as well as Tony's history tattooing out of Brooklyn, New York. All right, so we're in Glendale, Queens, and I'm over at R&D Tattoo, and I'm talking to Rich Phi, the co-owner of R&D Tattoo. How long have you been here, Rich?
I've been here since about 2001.
2001, wow, so 20 years, basically, yeah. So, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little about yourself, where you're from, how long you've been tattooing?
I've been tattooing since about 2001. I'm from Queens, New York, South Queens my whole life, Woodhaven on Jamaica Ave until I was a preteen, and then at Ozone Park when I turned that, and I lived in South Queens my whole life.
So South Queens, okay.
South Queens, yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Ozone Park, at one time known as like the epicenter of like mafia in the freaking world, basically.
Yeah,
Ozone
I used to see it all the time growing up. I mean, I lived right by the quote unquote red door.
Yeah,
I used to see those dudes stand outside every day.
The red doors on Bergen Hunt and Fish. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I came here today because I'm doing the story on Sal DeSarno, also known as Crazy Sal DeSarno. And back in 1980, well, he was arrested before that. He's got a bit of a criminal history. But back in 80, he kills a cop by the name of Cecil Sledge over on Flatlands Avenue. And one of the things that stands out about him is, of course, the tattoo on his chest, which is kind of why I'm here today to speak to you about. I've been aware of the design for a long time, and at some point, that I ran across probably through one of these tattoo Instagrams or something, the photo of Sal, and you see that skull with the cowboy hat and the handkerchief prominent. I mean, obviously he's, nobody to be
worshipped, but
exactly. But
it was, Tony used to say all the time that Tony Polito, who was one of the guys that helped me along the way in tattooing, who did that tattoo.
Right.
He said when that was on the cover of the Daily News, because that picture of him getting taken out, he said that became the most popular tattoo in Brooklyn.
That's crazy. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is I always found weird, and I've talked to people about it, while they're getting tattooed about it, that it's strange that it's become such a iconic New York tattoo when it's a cowboy.
Exactly.
We have no fucking cowboys in New York, so it's a pretty wild thing.
Yeah, and like you said, he's no one to worship, but you got to admit when you see that newspaper, I mean, that's badass. You see that tattoo on his chest.
Yeah,
it's like holy.
I mean, it's cool. It's a really cool tattoo. Yeah. I mean, it is a very iconic for that era type of picture. You know what I mean? Whether whether you hate cops, love cops, or whatever, you don't really want to see anybody die. But of course, it is an iconic photograph, and it's become iconic in the tattoo world.
Yeah, I mean, especially like now with the advent of Instagram and all these designs are spreading across the world. I mean, you see it pop up all over the world now. And I mean, even people overseas, they caught on. We'll get to like the name as far as what we'll call it, but the Crazy Sal tattoo.
I mean, it's wild that it's now kind of referred to as the Crazy Sal. I mean, that's it. The design obviously predates that.
Yeah.
Far away. You know what I mean? I could tell you that Cap Coleman is the first one that I know of, and I'll also text you the source. I know the source of it.
It's a book, right?
It's a book
from like 1936.
It's a book from way early.
I think it's like a Death on something ranch or something.
Yes.
I'll talk about it in the part before this. Yeah. So. And it's basically exactly what we see. It's right on that book.
The Coleman version, which has got like really round eyes, and it's a little bit, it's got a little bit. It's a little bit different than the one that Sal had. Sal had the one from Tony did that he redrew from this company, Spalding and Rogers, who did a lot of tattoo flags.
Right.
So the one that, and I'm sure you'll show it. I have the sheet out there. I'm sure you'll show it.
Yep.
That was originally from. That was the Spalding and Rogers version.
Okay. Yeah, and Cap Coleman,
all these things. It's just folk art, so it kind of really just all like.
Yeah, and he's a guy out of Norfolk, Virginia. I mean, chances are you have
something on this wall.
This is actually an original Coleman right here.
Oh, get out of here!
Yeah.
No way. So that boat right there.
The boat is an original Coleman.
Oh, that's wild. So that was salvaged from his shop.
Yeah. It was gifted to me by my friend Mike Schwager. Yeah.
Wow. I heard there was some kind of fire at the shop, and they just threw all his shit on the street.
That's Wagner. That's Charlie Wagner is the guy that got all his shit thrown out.
Oh, that's
Coleman. There might have been a fire. Coleman had a couple places. There might have been a fire there too, but these guys were prolific, and these guys were. The other thing is that they mostly dealt with the military trade, so they had, the 1st and the 15th they had 2 busy 3-day periods, and the rest of the time they were sitting around. So they all did massive amounts of flash.
That's great, man. Yeah, and it's stood the test of time, obviously. So let's talk about Tony. I mean, how did you meet Tony? I mean, he's a guy that was tattooing in Brooklyn, like you said, you told me, in the late 60s to like even into the 2000s. You're talking about like 50 years of tattooing. Yeah. Through some of the roughest eras of New York City history. So can you tell me like how you met him? And
Sure. Tony tattooed in Crown Heights. He used to refer to it sometimes as Pigtown. He started in 60. He started in 59, but he actually came back to New York and started tattooing. He traveled around. He was upstate. He was in Chicago. He was in a few places, but he was the only tattooer from the year 1970. The only tattooer in New York, because she got banned in 64. So he was the only tattooer in the year 1970, and I think part of 71 until Tom DeVita started.
Right.
He was just it was a very small community when I first started tattooing. There wasn't a lot of people around. He came here to get a tattoo of Tony Polito came to get a tattoo of Marilyn Monroe from one of the guys that used to own the shop, Rob Freund.
Oh, wow.
And I met him then. Both had like old school Italian upbringings, kind of. So I kind of hit it off with him, and I wound up starting to do conventions with him. Then I wound up starting to work on his shop on Saturdays. So, he became one of my best friends, one of my mentors and stuff like that. But I was tattooing about 10 years or so, maybe a little less, by the time I started really hanging around Tony.
Okay. So about 2010-ish, something like that.
Yeah, maybe 2008, 2009, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so you're saying like he's the only game in town, right? So I picture like to focus on, let's say 1970 to like 1990. Let's say those 2 decades right there, where it's like some of the roughest times in New York City history with the crime, the violence. I mean,
the worst.
I'm sure like there was such a diverse clientele. I mean, I picture anywhere from like gangsters to blue collar dudes and women. So who was he like really dealing with? Was it usually a rough crowd?
I mean, he would say Tony would refer to people that were kind of like involved in gangster shit. He would always refer to them as hoods.
Hoods, right.
So he would say, we got the hoods, and then he would say we got the Irish from Rockaway. So he got a real rough old New York crowd. Tony liked to make money, so Tony really didn't refuse to tattoo too many people. We speaking about Sal. Tony really didn't like that guy.
Okay.
Tony, he anytime the guy's name would come up, Tony would throw his hands up in the air and be like, "Oh, this fucking," So it was he didn't like him at all. But Tony liked to make money, so when the guy came in to get tattooed, he tattooed him. Like now in 2021, 2022, if we don't like the looks of somebody or we don't like the way somebody acts when they come into the tattoo shop, well, get the fuck out of here. Tony was not. That was not the vibe. And Tony would also say back then it was a little different because it was illegal. So since tattooing was illegal, the clients had a little bit more of an upper hand, because if they came into your shop and you were going to tattoo them and you act like a jerk off to them, they were going to drop a dime on you.
Yeah.
And they were going to call it. So it was kind of like, because it was an illegal activity, you couldn't really. So that's probably why Tony tattooed him.
Interesting. Yeah. So from the way you talk, I guess he knew about him before that. He was.
I think he tattooed him a couple times before that.
Okay, yeah, because I kind of see in the picture there's something peeking out, maybe of his arm. I see like he had another.
Yeah, I think he did a few tattoos on his arms. I would assume, I don't know this to be a fact, but I think that was the last one that he got.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, the tattoo is definitely well healed in those pictures.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't like it wasn't like he had gotten it a couple of weeks before.
Okay. Yeah, he gets out of jail in like 79, I think, and then by 1980 he does, what he does. So now, can you talk about if Tony spoke to you about the experience of tattooing him, maybe even doing that chest piece?
Well, he would say that like the guy was schizophrenic.
Okay.
He said the guy was that's the reason why, and he said that the guy was straight up crazy, and I guess maybe he had a drinking problem, and I guess the guy would come in like a bat out of hell and into the shop, and it was like, when you get these type of clients in the shop, you want to get them in and get them out as fast as possible. So
Right.
Tony did say, I don't know anything about the specifics of that particular tattoo, what transpired, but I do remember talking to Tony about that tattoo, and he was like, I did that tattoo so fucking fast. You know what I mean? So it was probably really done really quick, because the guy was probably a menace.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I read from newspaper articles, and they had quotes from his mother, she was saying, other people in Canarsie were saying he's kind of an outcast, kind of a strange guy. One person even reported, I think, that he broke a bottle over his head and it didn't even faze him. So as I was reading all these weird stories, and of course his mother, just said, he just wanted to be liked, is the quote. He didn't hate anybody. So I could see,
And Tony used to tell me, I guess the guy had and again, I don't know, these stories, sometimes the personalities, or sometimes there's tall tales involved, but I believe Tony said that the guy used to rob people's motorcycles a lot.
Okay, that makes sense, because he went to jail for robbing someone, and then he was wanted at the time for a donut shop robbery, actually, when he did that.
Yeah, I guess he used to steal bikes.
Yeah, so.
Again, it could have been Tony had a memory where sometimes he'd be talking about somebody and he'd jump to the next person, and I really never caught.
Right.
But we, at one point, while Tony was still with us, while Tony was still alive, there was a dude, Kenneth, can't remember his last name, or Kenneth Cohen. He was recording a documentary about Tony.
Okay.
So he did this big documentary, and he actually went and visited Sal twice.
Really?
He went and visited Sal, and he told me the guy was crazy. Wow. So that was 6 years ago.
Wow.
He said he went and visited him, and it upset Tony that he went, and he was like, what does that guy have to do with me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That guy got nothing to do with me. I remember it upsetting Tony that he was like, what the fuck is he talking to that guy for? So, but yeah, it's like weird, like it's a weird thing to have Tony, who's become so adored in this business, this weird, crazy person attached to him.
Exactly. Yeah, I could see how that could be a little funny.
Yeah, it was. Tony definitely didn't like him, and I don't really know that Tony knew before he passed that they were calling that tattoo the Crazy Sal, but Tony wouldn't have been hyped on that.
Yeah. Now, what did Tony refer to it as?
Tony used to call it the Rough Rider.
Okay.
He said it had something to do with Teddy Roosevelt.
Right. Yeah.
That it was a patch, like a for cavalry. How do you say that word? Whatever. However you say it. Cavalry.
I think that's what they called themselves, the Rough Riders.
Yeah. He
exploring and hunting and all that shit.
No, I think that's the people that come in. Calling the cavalry. That's when shit gets real. That's these riders on the horses that come in and like the military outfit, I guess.
Backup and stuff. Yeah. So I guess So yeah, I mean, as prolific as Tony is, I guess that's something that's kind of followed him, even in the afterlife. This guy.
But strangely enough, not till social media.
Not till social media. I was going to get into
that. It was social media that I think did that. It was later on. I think that picture had come out. I think maybe it was posted on some sort of like like old New York page or something like that. And then we all started to put two and two together, asking Tony, did you do that tattoo? And so on and so forth. And it was, I guess it was like, it already had hit him in 1980 when it happened, and it was on whatever happened when it was on the cover of the paper. He already went through all the shit, and then I guess again it happened to him,
Right.
a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, however many years ago.
Yeah, because as we said before, with like Instagram and all this internet stuff, these designs are just making their way across the globe, which is cool to see people embrace, American tattooing.
For sure, sure.
It's pretty awesome, man. So his feelings on Sal, obviously not too good, of course. So what would you say his general feelings on the legacy of that tattoo, because he's become so associated with it?
I mean, I don't really know that. I think that a lot of it really was post him passing away, or at least post him like being in the thick of it. He was really sick for the last couple of years of his life. So I mean, I would talk to him about it and stuff like that, and I made some reference to it at one point, and he didn't know what tattoo I was talking about until I had said, it's that tattoo that you did on that guy Crazy Sal that was on the newspaper cover.
Right.
And then he like threw his hands up and said, "Oh, that's fucking thing again." You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't. He definitely would not have been hyped that that is part of his legacy. But it was a rough and tumble bunch that you tattooed back then. Like,
for sure.
You never tattooed like, I tattoo soccer moms and shit a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He didn't do that. He tattooed the roughest of the rough, like like he said, the hoods.
Right. So along with that, I mean, was there also like blue collar workers and regular guys coming in there, or was it really just like an outcast culture?
I think back in that point, it was a lot of the lower belly, like the underbelly of society. I mean, I'm sure you had military guys, and or a cop or a fireman who wanted to get something on his arm or something like that. But Tony was in like he was in the fucking, he was deep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was, by the time that like the late 70s or early 80s rolled around, there was other options where you didn't have to go into fucking Crown Heights, which was the roughest of the rough. I mean, even in 2000, 11, 12, 13, 14, when I was down there working, it's a rough neighborhood still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a rough neighborhood still. I mean, not nearly what it was, I'm sure, in 1990 or 1980, but it still was rough.
So how about you? I mean, what is your feeling on that tattoo, and how many have you done? I mean, I would imagine you've done.
I mean, I do them so often.
Yeah.
It's great. Like I like to do at least one a week. You know what I mean?
One a week.
At least. Yeah.
Holy
I mean,
crap.
it's a lot of people associate me with Tony.
Yeah.
And
sure. That's why I came here. Yeah.
A lot of people, I know Bert Crack over on Smith Street. I think he actually has the sheet in the front is a print of the original sheet that hung in Tony's. I think Bert owns the actual sheet, the actual original sheet. So yeah, I do. I think Bert and me probably do the most of those. You know what I mean? Because we're the two probably that are most associated.
Right.
I call it the Queen's Cowboy every time I post it. I never really call it the Crazy Sal.
No, that's cool. Take ownership. I mean, you're the one banging them out probably more than than most. So, and then even Bert Crack, you were speaking of Smith Street Tattoo in Brooklyn. He even gave one to Jonah Hill, if I'm not mistaken.
He might have
one on Jonah Hill's.
I don't know if Bert did it or one of the other guys did it, but yeah, I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I think that.
I wonder if Jonah Hill's calling it the Crazy Sal.
Yeah, that's what I was. I'm pretty sure.
I know. So. I'll tell you this: it probably not, because Bert always dislikes calling Crazy Sal. Okay. Also, like it's.
Yeah.
It's weird because it's like anytime, even when I've posted that tattoo before with the picture of Sal DeSarno and said like, Tony did this tattoo, whatever. And I actually recreated it on someone's chest, like the right size and everything. Wow. And I did it and I posted it and I got backlash. Yeah. You know what I mean? I got backlash. I got people, nothing public, but people DM'd me, were like, "Yo, that dude killed a cop and blah, 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 blah. That guy was a scumbag." And so, I don't really like it. I didn't really like calling it the Crazy Sal for the said reasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, now it's out there. Everyone's calling
It just
it.
is. I mean, I seen a dude from like Finland post it and wrote Crazy Sal.
Wow.
And it was like, there was like, I follow this dude, I think he was from Finland. And it was like the tattoo and then like a whole bunch of words I didn't understand, like all consonants all together. And then it just said Crazy Sal and then a whole bunch of other words I didn't understand. So they were referring it even there as Crazy Sal.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, I mean, I'm not here, obviously you see what I do on my channel. I try to cover these low-key or forgotten New York City crime stories, and then obviously that's kind of one of them. And this
I mean, history is history.
History's history,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? It happened.
Yeah, taking an even deeper look, going into that tattoo, because I could imagine, like, people that know nothing about tattoos that saw that headline the next day, like, what the hell? Like, who the hell is this dude? Like,
And you know what's funny about that tattoo and that story and everything? Like, when I did post it and caught like backlash, I did wind up talking to a couple of people, who had like either had police in their family or had lived through that, and everybody, numerous people. I guess there was another cover, like maybe like the next day or
there's a couple of them,
and it was that dude's badge. It was the cop's badge because the cop got dragged.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
So it was the cop's badge, and it was like run down into like almost nothing. It was like run down into like a little nub, and that's what it seems like the public in New York City thought about more than the tattoo. I mean, I'm in the tattoo bubble, and you got tattoos, and we look at the tattoos, but I think that that the whole part of that the part of that every story that's really harsh that has a part that like twists the knife. I think it was the badge.
Yeah.
That it got, that was really what like grabbed New York City by the
right.
By the heartstrings. Right.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and it was in a couple. Yeah, he made a few, appearances. Of course, he was on the front page, and they obviously they talk about the tattoo in the articles because.
Do they really talk about the tattoo in the article?
It's so prominent. Yeah, I mean, I could send you some of the articles. Yeah, they definitely talk about it. Yeah, skull with the cowboy hat and handkerchief, because you can't avoid looking at it. I mean, it's one of those things. So this tattoo is all over the world. People are calling it, this Crazy Sal, and I thought it would be awesome to come talk to you. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, for sure, man.
And do you know of anyone that maybe Tony tattooed? Anyone notable? Did he ever speak to you about any hoods, as he called them, gangsters, mobsters?
I know he tattooed a lot of mobsters. Me and you were talking. He before this, he told me he tattooed Fred Flintstone on Roy DeMeo.
That's
I don't know if that's true.
That's crazy.
He
said it was on his leg, right?
I think on his calf. He said.
It's but kind of an interesting choice.
He would, Tony was a crazy guy. He was a dude that was like he told like like this whole there's a lot of showmanship in the way he tattooed. You know what I mean? There was back then you had people tattooing all the same designs like over and over and over again. So in order to stand out from the crowd, you had to be this, you had to be that, you had to be that, and he was a showman. So he would often say that story that he told me. One of his famous stories was he used to say, "Richie, let me ask you a question. If you bought a brand new Cadillac, it was a beautiful Cadillac, and I said to you, hey, Richie, let me go outside there and paint Fred Flintstone on the side. You'd tell me to go fuck myself, wouldn't you?" I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah, but these people all get it tattooed on them. And then he would always bring up, even that Roy DeMeo, the killer guy.
Yeah.
He had a Fred Flintstone. I was like, so if that's true, I don't know.
Could be, man.
I mean, I know he told me to tattoo Mike Tyson too.
Possible. I mean,
he told me to tattoo Mike Tyson back then.
One of the only games in town. I mean, it would make sense. I definitely know that some people in his crew were tattooed. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gemini twins with Roy DeMeo.
Okay,
Center. I know Anthony Center, I think, had a hot stuff on his arm, a hot stuff devil.
I mean, if those guys had tattoos, they were from Brooklyn. They got them from Tony.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One of my fucking parlor tricks all the time is like when an old guy comes in here and they're talking about it and they start pulling up their sleeves and they tell me, oh, I got this in Brooklyn in the 80s. I was like, oh, who did that? Tony? And they're like, yeah, how'd you know? And I make it. It is great work, and I can recognize it in a way, but I got a 99 time out of 100 chance of being right because he tattooed the whole fucking city.
Right. So you had him there, and You also had like Mike Perfetto, right? And
Yeah,
when was
Perfetto in
he?
Brooklyn, but he started in like 75. He
75.
started in
Wow.
75, and he started. I don't think he really became like hitting until a little later when he. I think in the 75 and in the early part of his career, he was still kind of in his bedroom
Cool.
of his parents' house,
Okay.
tattooing, and until he got his own shop, I don't think. And he really hit off because he was up the block. I mean, he's an excellent tattooer too, but he really hit off because he was up the block from Lemoore's,
Right.
the old rock and roll club. So he had a lot of dudes coming,
Hardcore guys.
all the hardcore and punk rock kids. They all have, that was like, so you had him in Brooklyn, Tony in Brooklyn.
So Rich, yeah. So if you plug your business, man, this is a beautiful shop, old school traditional tattoo. We're gonna look at some of it also.
Yeah, well,
And,
this is the shop, R&D Tattoo. We've been here since 1997. We're going to celebrate our 25th anniversary this June. Yeah, we got a bunch of artists here. They're all mostly specialized in traditional tattooing and come through.
So for someone that's watching this and you say traditional tattoo or American traditional tattoo, can you just describe that for people?
The best way to describe it is it's usually like bold lines, velvety black shading, solid color. You know what I mean? It's not a lot of there's not a lot of realistic
Right.
vibes to it. It's a tattoo you're fucking, your Uncle Charlie would have had.
When
you know what I mean?
You know what it is.
The horseshoe he would have had on his arm.
Right.
It's kind of carrying on the tradition. Again, started in New York City, so
yeah, for sure. And I love it. That's pretty much the only style I've ever been tatted in. And I know some people don't understand it. They think it's too simple, but it's definitely not.
Yeah, sometimes they come in and say, "Oh, I don't really want those cartoons." But
call it cartoons.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Not everybody likes every restaurant, right?
So that's right. That's it, man.
Now we got to go one day on a tattoo tour of all the illegal spots.
I would love to. Man.
That's crime.
For sure, man. I'm trying to cover everything.
That's crime. I'll tell you. I mean, a lot of them are, unfortunately, like Tony's got knocked down. It's a big building now, but yeah. I can show you where a lot of the spots were in the outer boroughs. And if not to plug something that's completely
do it, man.
But if you go into Manhattan, Michelle from Daredevil does a whole tour.
Oh, that's right.
Of all the Manhattan ones.
Yeah,
they do the whole Manhattan tour of where all those shops were. But I can show you the Brooklyn, Queens.
That would be great, man. I'd definitely love that.
Pretty much only Brooklyn, Queens. That's where I don't really leave here that much.
Yeah, and that's kind of, you have a little bit of Manhattan, but would you say Brooklyn and Queens kind of was like the epicenter, really? Like a lot of the low-key big guys were kind of operating out of?
Brooklyn was probably the epicenter of tattooing. For that, I don't know. You had Tom DeVita, who was doing a lot of tattooing in the Lower East Side at that point too. So I don't know. I'm just like a Brooklyn Queens guy. So
yeah, me too.
We had in our neighborhood we had P.T. Quinto, who was one of the best tattooers I ever met. That's a sheet of his flash right there. That's the first sheet of flash he ever did in the 70s. This one with the roses and the peacock.
Oh, that's awesome.
We had Pete, so we had a very, very excellent neighborhood tattooer in Pete. So,
all right, man. Well, before we end this part here, Rich, if you have anything, maybe if you could, we spoke about Tony. If you can kind of say a few words just to sum up his career and his impact on tattooing. Not only in New York City and Brooklyn, but because these traditional tattoos, these designs. I mean, these are like taking over the world. They're all over the place now. Even in Japan, I saw they got a huge culture.
Sure, there's a big culture in Japan.
Yeah. So if you could sum up Tony, maybe if you have anything,
I mean, Tony he was like a tattooer in the hustler sense.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If we would joke around. Me and him would both say to each other all the time, like, if we wanted to be artists, we put on funny hats and move to France. You know what I mean? Like, street guys. You know what I mean? Neighborhood knock around type of fellas. That's the type of tattooer he was. That's the type of man he was. He had other things going on in that shop. He did all right with. So he was a hustler. He was a street guy. So because and it was so New York, the vibe he had, that I think that's why people are drawn to him so much, because it's exactly what you would expect. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he rarely let you down when it came to like what you expect this dude to do.
Right.
He's doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what it was. And as far as tattooing, the actual craft of it, um, because he was so fast and efficient, the tattoos healed up so well because they were done with the least amount of trauma. That's what he would always like put in my head. Like, don't traumatize the skin. Don't sit there and, don't do this, don't do that. Just get it on and get them out.
Yeah.
And because of that way of just really like doing tattooing like that, the tattoos really, really stood the test of time because he never overworked them. You know what I mean? He didn't have the chance. He used to always say, don't let the chair get warm. I mean, don't let the chair get cold.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like an old school philosophy, right? I mean, you hear like Sailor Jerry just doing sailor after sailor
Yeah,
after
I mean that's
sailor,
the way
pumping them out.
they'll never ever. That was the last of. If we're going to talk about tattooing as far as like the way stuff works and like the Ed Hardys and stuff like that came along and made it into art, and that's great. And I like some of that myself. Uh, but there was a time when it was the production style shop where it was like get them in, get them in, get them in, get them in. The military style tattoo shop. Tony was running that, the last American version of that. I mean that ran like that until the 90s.
Wow.
Nobody was doing that in the 90s. Like that ship kind of sailed in the 70s.
Right.
And this dude was doing it production style where one guy was outlining, he was Tony was coloring it, and it was like his nephew Willie. Big ups to Willie.
All right, man. So if you don't mind, if we could just like look around,
yeah, for sure.
Look at some Flash, and maybe show me some Tony's.
Yeah, you got it.
So that's Tony right there for everybody.
Yeah, and you can see he looks like one of the boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole wall is all Tony.
Wow.
Flash. This is all. That's one of Tony's machines there.
Cool. And even up top, huh?
Yeah, those ones up top are colored by Tony. Yeah, it's all Malone sheets that are colored by Tony. These two are Tony also. This eagle one and the geisha girl, and that one actually is me and Tony together in 2013.
That's awesome. And you said you had this machine over there, right?
Yeah, this is a machine right over here.
So nowadays they kind of use a different, some people use a different, what would you call it, rotor?
Some people use rotors, yeah.
Yeah.
I use them sometimes too.
Cool.
But most of the time I just use their old standards.
All right.
Yeah, so this whole wall, this little section of wall is all tattooers from New York. There's all prints of Flash from New York, Peachy Aquinto, Ronnie DeLacqua, Big Joe Kaplan, and Tony. And this is a print of the actual sheet.
There it is.
That the tattoo would have been picked off. This actual sheet. Like I said, I believe the original is at Smith Street.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that. But yeah, this would have been, so this is the exact size. So you can kind of see, I got a big hand, but you could see that thing was big on his chest. It's not a small tattoo. When you look at all these tattoos that were picked back in the days like that, a lot of them were small guys, where you look at this so he probably came in and picked the biggest thing on the wall.
He just said, give me that.
He was probably, you know what I mean? Because the guy wasn't a cowboy,
It really is funny, the Queen's Cowboy. I like that. For anyone wondering, when I said hot stuff before about Anthony Center, I was speaking about one of these doubles here. But yeah, this is really classic, man. I love this stuff. Let me get Review of everything. Oh, we got another one here. This is by you right here.
Yeah, that's by my partner Dave. Yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot of variations. Probably if you look on the wall, there's quite a few variations of that tattoo.
All right. Well, once again, Rich, thanks, man.
You got it.
Really appreciate it, bro.
You got it, brother.
This is great. And I'm gonna come back to get something from you.
Yeah, whenever you want, huh?
R&D Tattoo, Myrtle Avenue, Glendale, Queens, New York City. Come by.
Yep.